So it's all questions, because once you start telling them, half the time they just tune you out, right? But you have to ask logical questions that are not a yes or no answer, questions that are going to get them to think, which are typically the how, what, where, why, when, and who, right? So
Mhm.
those are the questions you have to learn how to ask. And then you have to learn how to listen super intently, because great salespeople are great listeners. And then use what they tell you because you're listening, and formulate another sentence with it. And you continue the conversation. And then you can lead them through great conversations to get them to the point where you get them where you want them, but they think it was their idea, because that's selling.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Vulcan7 Coaches and Mentors, where we bring you some of the best in the industry so that they can share with you their tips and strategies so that you can implement in your business immediately. Now, with that being said, we love to talk about prospecting, objection handling. We know that there has been so much going on in the real estate world because of buyers, agents, commissions, lawsuits. So with that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and bring on today's guest, and we're going to dive deeper into these topics. So with that being said, I want to bring on Sohail Salahuddin. Welcome.
Thank you, Loida. Thanks for having me on. Excited to give back to anybody who's watching this and be a contribution. Let's go.
Awesome. Yes. Well, we're glad that you're here. But for anyone that maybe is not too familiar with you, go ahead and kind of share with everyone a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've been in the real estate industry for almost 20 years. I started off on the mortgage side back in 2005, and from there I went into condo conversions and developments, and didn't really start doing. And then I had my own real estate company with a partner from 2007 until 2011, 2012. And I really didn't get started into brokering deals for clients until about 2012. And that's when that's when I had to learn the skills so I can acquire a new business, and had to learn how to prospect, handle objections, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. So what does your company, team, your business look like now?
Yeah, so I have a small team, not a big team. There's 10 of us total. We have 5 agents plus myself. So there's a total of 6 agents and 4 staff.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, I don't.
So
Sorry, just
go
gonna say,
ahead.
I just don't believe in having a really big team where each agent's not productive at a high level. I'd rather grow. So my idea is to grow the team small and have each agent to be highly productive before I bring in another agent.
Exactly. No, I absolutely love that. And I'm glad that you're bringing that up. And I think that that would be a perfect point to get started on
Okay.
because there's a lot of agents out there. I feel like anybody now has a real estate license, but not everyone is productive. They don't know what they're doing. So for you, whenever you have a team member or someone that you bring on, what does that process look like to help them and train them to be a producing and productive agent?
Yeah. So when we bring somebody on, we have a 30, 60, 90 onboarding. It starts off relatively simple, easy tasks like reading 2 books, doing a book report in the book so we know that they read it and they understood the focal point of the book. And and then from there it goes on to like making sure they complete their COI is, learning the scripts. And then once they get past the 30 days, then it gets to a little bit more technical skills and hands-on. Then it's like actual prospecting, making calls. They have to set 4 appointments on the second 30 days, which is the 30 to 60 day mark. And our goal is by 90 days to have them up and running as self-sufficient as possible. So Loida, for my team, everything's done for them except the acquisition of clients. So really, that's all we have our team members focus on is the skills to acquire clients, the executionable steps to make those calls, door knock, whatever it takes to find new clients, and then the skill of communication, because we don't have anything to sell, like nothing tangible, right? we sell homes, but we don't sell a home until we have the house. And so we have to find the clients first before we have a house to sell. And so if the highest and best use of our time is the acquisition of clients, then the highest skill that we can have is the to be a prolific communicator, to communicate value to those people.
Absolutely. And I know that you mentioned 4 appointments, right? That is the goal for them to accomplish within that time frame that you mentioned. Is there a specific, is it buyers, sellers, does it matter where the four come from?
Um, that's a really good question. It matters who the agent is. So, like, we have buyer's agents and then we have listing agents. So, if it's a buyer's agent, then we want them to focus on the four buyers, listing agent, then four listings.
Okay. So when it comes to listings, um, what lead sources do you have them go after, or perhaps you yourself that recommend agents to focus on?
So, the sources I use are canceled expireds, for sale by owners, just listed, just solds, my past clients, and my database. And then we have leads that come through pay per click. Those don't necessarily bring a lot of sellers, more buyers, but those are the main lead generation sources that we have. And then open houses. So we do use open houses to get listings too. And we have a process and a script on how we handle as soon as somebody walks in. We welcome them. And one of the key questions we say, by the way, which home are you selling in the neighborhood? So we ask these little trigger questions to find out if they have something to sell, where it's located. And in the open house, not only do we have the property brochures, but we also have our presentation books out. So if somebody's thinking about selling, they could just take it. It has all the details. And of course, then we follow up with them and try and get the listing appointment set.
Okay. That's awesome. So we have expires for sale by owners, canceled, obviously. And that's great that you brought up, the process that you have for open houses, because sometimes some agents completely miss, people that are coming through, or they don't have a process for that. They just think, I might get their phone number, ask them if they're working with somebody or not, and then we'll just go from there. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think people don't understand that most people who are 80% of people who are buying, they might have something to sell. So even the buyer leads that come through on our website or anywhere from the internet, we always go after them as if they still have a house to sell, and we want to acquire the ability to list that for them and get it sold.
yeah, absolutely. And with that comes the communication, which you touched on how important that is, communication and your skills,
Yeah,
especially now.
yeah. Well, communication is the only skill that we have,
Yeah,
right? Because it's the words that come out of our mouth, our body language, our tonality, the rate of speech, the pauses between words. But that's the only thing that we have to communicate value. I mean, granted, you have brochures and things like that, but you can't be a mute and communicate those things. So you have to be able to have good, direct conversations with people. You have to be the people of authority, the person of authority, as a professional, and you have to be able to handle the objections, and you have to be witty about it. Because if you don't come off witty in the fact that you know what you're talking about, they're probably just going to turn a blind eye to you and look for someone who's more capable of handling the sale for them.
yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's exactly how I feel sometimes when agents say, well, what makes me different? And it goes down to your skills. Sometimes when you're meeting with a client, if they don't feel like they trust you or that you're capable of delivering a job, they're going to think that, every real estate agent is the same. So why should I pay 6%, 7% when I can just pay a flat fee? But it goes down to what you just mentioned, coming across with authority and having a presence and also delivering your value.
Yeah, yeah, and you're always going to get the commission shoppers. You're going to get people who want to sell it themselves. You're going to get everything from A to Z. But the fact is, because we know that we're going to get those things, we just have to be prepared, right? So when the commission objection comes up, you just have to know how to handle it. If someone says they can sell it themselves, or if someone says that they can go with a company that chops their commissions, and we all know who those are. But when a seller says, "Well, why would I pay you 6% when I have an agent that's going to charge me 4?" You have to know how to respond to that.
Exactly. Always having multiple, I like to say, have multiple objection handlers for that one objection. That way you know exactly what direction to come in from so that they can see, okay, well, you're right.
Yes,
Maybe I do need a full service agent.
1000%. And most people do. They just don't know it until they find that agent
Mhm.
because they don't know good from bad until they've had bad and they've had good.
Exactly. Yes. And one thing that I was hearing recently, it was an agent sharing with me that so she's working with the seller and then the lawsuit happened, everything going on in the media, social media, TV news. And she said, when we initially met, she was fine with paying the 6%. Now all of this came out. Now she says, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. So let's say there's someone watching this that is going through that scenario. How would you coach them through conversations to have or just how to deal with clients that are now thinking this?
Yeah. So if it was a seller that said to me, I hear that we don't have to pay agents anymore and I don't want to pay a buyer's agent commission. My response would say, well, look, you're in control. It's your home. You could do that, whatever you want. Here's a question for you. Do you really want to sell this home? Well, yeah, I want to sell it. Great. And you understand that we live in an incentive based world. So people work on behalf of receiving a reward for their work. And that's just the way things go. So would you rather have 100 agents working for you because they know they're going to be compensated? Or would you rather have one that may be able to get a buyer that's going to pay their own commission? Which one do you think is going to provide you with the most benefit and results? Because after you are Mrs. Seller, you do want results, don't you? Yes. Great. So if there are 3 homes on your block and you're not paying a commission, the other 2 are, which 2 do you think are going to sell first? So it's all questions because once you start telling them, half the time they just tune you out, right? But you have to ask logical questions that are not a yes or no answer, questions that are going to get them to think, which are typically the how, what, where, why, when, and who, right? So
Mhm.
those are the questions you have to learn how to ask. And then you have to learn how to listen super intently because great salespeople are great listeners. And then use what they tell you because you're listening and formulate another sentence with it. And you continue the conversation. And then you can lead them through great conversations to get them to the point where you get them where you want them, but they think it was their idea because that's selling.
Absolutely. And adding on to this, scenario, let's say the seller's like, you know what, um, you find me a buyer. I'll pay you 3%, but you just find me a buyer. I'm just not going to pay a buyer's agent.
Mrs. Seller, that's exactly why you're hiring me. You hired me to find you a buyer. That's what I'm going to do. Let's say that a buyer comes along that's willing to pay full price, but they have an agent and they don't want to pay their agent's commission because there's another home for sale on the block and they can just go to that home. When that situation arises, how do you want me to handle it?
So if you're watching this, please rewind, the last couple of minutes because I think everything that you just mentioned is perfect, and we're going to encounter those scenarios where sellers are just going to think, I just don't want to pay a buyer's agent anymore. Scratch what we signed earlier a couple months. I see the news are saying you guys don't need to be paid 6%. So these are just, some ways of you having a conversation. And it goes back to the skill of communication and how you deliver it. Because if you don't deliver it successfully, they're going to be like, well, no, just go find me a buyer. And at that point, who's in control?
Yeah, yeah, and you have to communicate value. So the stronger that we can communicate the value in what we offer and on how we're going to get them the results that they want, which also includes paying a buyer's agent compensation. But the stronger we can communicate value to the sellers that we work with, the stronger their perception that we are the authority is. And I can't stress that enough. Because see, what happens is a lot of agents they don't want to ask their clients tough questions. They don't want to have a little bit of conflict in the conversation to dig deep so you can find out the seller's motivation, so you can find out what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And so at the end of the day, you have agents that are just trying to appease their clients rather than trying to get the results that their clients truly want. And that's the dilemma that most agents have.
Yeah, having the tough conversations, even during transactions when it comes to negotiations. if I'm representing the seller and the buyer gives me a long list for repairs or dropping the price, and that's what separates an average agent from a top agent, just their ability to be able to deliver a message to their client so that they can demonstrate the value. um,
Yeah.
Now, for you specifically in your team, is there anything that has changed with what you're teaching them now versus maybe like 2 years ago?
Yeah, definitely. Because the market's changed and there's so many things that have transpired, right? Right before COVID, I think it was the robo dialing. So we had to overcome how to get in touch with people if they weren't answering their phone. The interest rates shot up. So we had to get people to still understand the market is strong based on low inventory. And then you have those buyers that, they don't want to pay a high interest rate, but they still want to move. It's similar to someone that wants to live, but they don't want to stop smoking, even though they're facing a deathly ill, right? That's the situation where you have to ask a lot of questions and get into their psyche, so they can understand and have clarity. Because sometimes people just don't have clarity. They have a mental block. They set a limitation within their head. Maybe I won't pay above this price, or maybe I won't go below this price. And you have to know how to get in their head and get them to see with clarity what's going to be best for them as far as their ability to make good judgment and decisions so they can have a property sold or so they can buy a property. And that's selling. And a lot of people just don't understand that. But strong salespeople ask great questions. They're great listeners, but they ask such good questions that the people that they're talking to have the ability to start thinking logically about the situation rather than emotionally. Because most people that, whether they're selling or whether they're buying, they're thinking emotionally. And especially if they're upset because they got a lowball offer and they don't want to take it, but they don't have any other offers on the table and they don't even want to counter to see where it can get to. Well, they're thinking highly emotionally. And so their logical thinking is clouded by the high emotions. So great salespeople know how to get in there and get them to start thinking with clear expectations.
That kind of reminds me also of sometimes buyers when they have found the perfect home and they say, I want to just, I'm not in a rush, so I don't want to put in an offer. Like I want to wait, maybe something else comes up.
Yeah.
Would you say that's something similar to what you were talking about?
Yeah. So let's say and we could use this in both ways. It's a buyer that
Mhm.
wants to buy a home, but they think they're going to wait, something's better is going to come up, or a seller that wants to sell, an offer comes in and they don't want to take it because they think something's better going to come along. So in that situation, I would say Mr. and Mrs. Seller or Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you have whether it's an offer or a home that you can buy or an offer that you can take. And I'll say, if nothing else comes along, are you willing to hold this property for another 6 months and hope that something comes along? If it's a buyer, are you willing to wait the market out for the next 6 to 12 months and hope that something else comes along? And then you dig a little deeper, like how would your family feel? But here's what I would do, because the more you the more talking you do, typically you tend to wear out the ability for yourself to get what you want. So I would probably say something like, if it's a buyer, I would say, no problem. Listen, I'm on your timeline. So if you're okay waiting a year and 2 years, whatever it may be, no problem. I'm going to extend the buyer's agency agreement for another year, and I'm going to send it over to you and just sign it off and get it back. If it takes 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, as long as your family's fine waiting for that home that they really want, the home that you're about to pass up, the home that your kids were so excited about, the home that your wife really wanted, but because you want to wait, they can't have that. As long as you're waiting, that's fine. Same thing with the seller. Mr. Seller, if you're fine waiting for another 6 months to a year for another offer to come along, that's fine. I'm going to send you over an extension for the listing agreement for another year. So that way we're prepared to sit on the year for another year and hope something better comes along.
I love it. I'm over here smiling because
Yeah.
that's sometimes, and I'm sure you tell this to your clients, and then it hits them like, oh man, like you're right. I don't want to see my family. My family's so excited. Maybe we should just go for it. Or they'll go talk to their spouse. So, yeah, I think those are definitely great ways to handle when people say things like that.
Yeah, and then you can also use stories. Stories are big. See, the thing is you never want to become adverse with them, and I know
Mhm.
agents that do that because they don't know how to maintain their own emotions. You don't want to become adverse with them because then what happens is number one, if they feel like you're working against them, guess what? You become the enemy.
Yeah.
And then eventually that's going to lead to them just finding somebody else, right? So you don't need to appease them, but you need to agree with them and then discreetly in a super persuasive and influential way get them to see that that's not in their best interest without you telling them. So for example, let's say I had a client that wants to sell but they don't want to drop the price, right? And we know price is the single issue. So I'll say, I understand that you don't want to drop the price and I'm on your side. Whatever you decide to do, I mean, listen, I'm 1,000% in support of you. But I want to tell you a story. I have a friend who's a doctor. He's an incredible doctor. And, he tells me that the clients that he has the hardest time helping to resolve their issues are people who need to lose weight and smokers. And see, just by you saying that you don't want to drop the price, but you want to sell, just reminds me of that because my friend told me that when someone comes in and they're smoking and they're deathly ill, and in order to live, they have to stop smoking. He tells me it's so difficult for him because they say, I want to live. And he says, well, Mr. Patient, you need to stop smoking. Well, I don't want to stop smoking. Well, do you want to live? Yeah, I want to live. Well, then you have to stop smoking. Well, I don't want to stop smoking. Well, you can't have them both. So you could live or you can die and continue to smoke. And then I'll turn to them and I'll say, just help me understand, why are you being that patient?
Nice. And I think that makes something like, oh, wow. And
Yeah,
it's
because
completely unrelated to real estate.
and then I'm not saying anything negative to them.
Yeah.
I'm just giving them an analogy and saying, like, I'm giving them something that's clear for them to understand. And then I'll
Yeah.
say, so why are you doing that? I didn't say
Yeah.
you're wrong for doing that. I didn't say it's never going to sell because I just said, so like, well, do you see the situation? Why are you doing it?
Yeah. It's like, please help me understand so that I can get a better idea of why.
Yes,
And I love it because it's not like you're fighting with them or telling them, no, you're wrong. We need to drop the price, which is, something sometimes a lot of agents do. But it puts us in a position where now we're having them explain themselves to us as to why they want that price.
bingo. And they did it without us having to tell them what to do. They came up with it because you're giving them a little bit of information so that they can determine their own, so that they can take that information and talk about their own conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's almost like as they're telling you, they realize like, oh yeah, I sound kind of dumb saying this, or he's right. We should probably adjust the price at this point.
1,000%. 1,000%.
So share with everyone that's listening, maybe any programs, any coaching, how they can get a hold of you, so that they can learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. So my cell phone's 312-437-7799. I am in the Chicagoland market. And my email is my first name, Sohail at sohailrealestate.com. Email's probably best, or a text. Happy to help anybody that watches this. I always try to come from a place of contribution. I know that selling is not easy. And for myself, I had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even a million or more, on different coaches to find out what's working and what's not working. And Loida, I've had a number of coaches. I've had different coaching programs, different personal coaches, and I've been in different environments. And I continue to be coached, even though I feel like when you think that there's not much more you can get, it just means you can't. It just means that you haven't got enough of the current coach, because every coach has their limitation. They kind of have their specialty, um, and everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs a coach, whether you think you do or you think you don't. You need a coach.
Awesome. And we're going to make sure to put all of your links in the description box below. So are you on Instagram as well? Can people find you?
Yeah, it's Sohail Real Estate.
Okay, there it is. Awesome. Well, Sohail, thank you so much for everything that you have shared today. For those of you that are watching, make sure to rewind because there were a lot of spots where you could probably write down what he said, and it'll definitely help you in your business. So with that being said, thank you so much, Sohail, once again, and we'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you so
Bye.
much, Leda. Appreciate it.